The following is a conversation between OpenAI CEO Sam Altman and United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, Amandeep Gill, on the future of AI. In this discussion, among other things, Sam shared some insight on what's coming in the AI world, including information on his new hardware AI device, and said we should expect some more cool things from OpenAI this year. Let's listen in.
So it was just at the State Department event, and you were as well, and we were having this whole conversation around how do we make sure that this technology benefits more people, that it is global, that it reduces inequality, not expanding inequality. And it was great to see so many leaders from companies out there making pledges. And I think it's a real challenge in that my sense is that without intervention, that's not the way that technology would inherently spread out its benefits. That it can, but it's not predetermined that it will. What needs to be done from each of your perspectives to make sure that all of the planet benefits and not just certain countries, not just certain people, not just certain slices of the economy? Amandeep?
I think you remember this, nothing about us without us. I think a fundamental step is to make the governance of AI more inclusive, bring the 118 countries that are not part of the 7 leading initiatives today into those discussions. And by governance, I don't mean regulation. That's the domain of governance. By governance, I mean steer, guidance. So how can we shape the development and the deployment of technology so that its opportunities are spread, the benefits are shared, and its risks are not loaded on to certain vulnerable populations or geographies. I think that's fundamentally important, and we took a great step yesterday with the adoption of the Global Digital Compact and the first universal framework on international governance.
And it does strike me that making those decisions, and we'll get back to governance, is a challenge, because the more people you have in the room, the better represented, but the harder it is. So I want to get into some of that, but Sam?
I agree with all of that, and the thing I would add on top is make it as cheap and abundant as possible. I think, intelligence too cheap to be here is not a literal statement, but it is a nice aspiration. And if we can make this, of course, with input and governance from all the people that be affected, but also just super widely accessible and abundant to anybody who wants to use it for anything, I think that will disproportionately benefit the developing world.
And it doesn't feel like that's the moment we're in yet. It does feel like right now the technology is somewhat expensive. It comes down pretty quickly, but my sense is the benefits at the moment are not necessarily being spread equally, or am I mistaken?
2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, the best AI in the world was GPT-3, and it was $15 per million tokens. Today, 2 years later, 26 months later, something like that, GPT-4o Mini, a much better model, is 15 cents per million tokens. So a reduction in cost by a factor of 100 for a much better model, the equivalent of a model that is, let's say like 10x, maybe more effective compute. We used to get excited about Moore's Law doubling the number of transistors every 18 months. This is a rate far, far beyond that. And, like 15 cents to generate 1 million reasonably helpful tokens, almost words.
I don't know. That's
getting better.
What do you think? Is cost the main barrier? So you talked about the importance of governance, and we'll come back to the importance of governance. But from a pure adoption standpoint, is cost enough? Is it about skills? Is it about languages?
I think cost is just one piece in terms of adoption and the spread and speed of adoption. I think we need to create the right use cases, and we are very far from the kind of use cases that would exponentially drive growth. So we may be seeing exponential growth or drop in certain aspects, and I'm speaking more as an engineer rather than a diplomat. And so what we need to see is democratization of applications, democratization of access, and also model development at a scale which is not at the scale where OpenAI is going or Anthropic is going, but the middle layer, which is more relevant to the sustainable development goals: agriculture, health, environment, education. We've seen this with digital public infrastructure. So when we switch from the connectivity paradigm, the supply side paradigm, to having a demand side push in terms of uptake of digital products and services, the market grew exponentially. I think this is what we need to shape through governance, as we need to work actively for, by the private sector and the public sector collaborating together.
I got to go on a trip around the world last year. Went to every continent except Antarctica, and I was struck by how much people are excited about these tools and using these tools all around the world for many things related to the Sustainable Development Goals. It's early, but 2 years ago, almost no one cared about AI. That was like before ChatGPT. And I think a lot of the fastest adopters are not in America, but are all around the world doing like really remarkable things for their communities, and the adoption and integration of these tools, the speed that it's happening around the world. Totally agree that we have a long way to go, and we need to figure out how to build this middle layer out. But I think what's happening is still pretty extraordinary.
Yes. And we also need to focus on the other AI. So this is not just large language models, but narrow AI that is, for example, in the healthcare area. I worked for 3 years in digital health and AI for health before coming to the UN. It's very hard when you want to get into the flow in terms of diagnostics flow and some of the trust issues. There you need to do narrow AI. I think the large language models, companies like OpenAI and Anthropic will have a huge role to play. They'll become like the foundations of some of the way in which we engage with humans, with customers, with citizens as governments, or patients when they're walking into hospital. But then you need other kinds of AI to solve some of the specific problems.
Although my sense is, and I've heard you say this, and I think if you take something like health, where you have a real, the U.S. model of doctor-patient, we have our criticisms about the health system, but it really doesn't scale this approach in the developing world. I mean, my sense is the ability to just have that type of diagnostic information broadly accessible in language will make a huge difference. Is that your sense on global health?
Look, obviously I have a bias here in favor of large language models being awesome for a lot of things. So we should discount.
That's the only softball you're getting, so you may as well.
But I think what's special about AI is the generalization that leads to the reasoning ability. So yes, these large models can memorize lots of facts and they can do all these domains, but they're the world's worst, most expensive, slowest, least accurate databases. What they can do that's quite remarkable is process information in a useful way. And it's always tempting to anthropomorphize, but something that is like reasoning ability to do this. And when we hear stories of doctors using ChatGPT to help them come up with a difficult differential diagnosis, and then as the human doctor figure out what the patient actually needs, we're very proud of that. And the fact that it can do it now so well in so many languages, we're very proud of that too. So narrow AI, I think, is important for lots of reasons, but the reasoning ability that comes from these general purpose models and the incredible ability of people to use this tool for very diverse use cases, but with the same underlying reasoning engine, we're certainly excited about that.
Since you went there, I kind of want to go there now. I was going to bring this up later, but it strikes me that we got this new model a couple weeks ago that you released, Strawberry, or O1 as it's now called, and it adds this additional reasoning capability. And my sense is it's hard on the outside world for the rest of us to appreciate what that means. And even as you guys presented it, it was like, oh, it's better at math and coding and science. My sense is it opens up a lot more doors. And could you talk for a minute about what is happening in Strawberry and what does it mean to be reasoning? Again, I know it's tempting not to anthropomorphize without anthropomorphizing too much. But what does it mean? Because my sense is, well, I'll give you one more thing. I struggle with this, covering this every day. One moment I'm really excited about LLMs, and then, I'll get to this point where I'm like, are they really going to go there? They're just kind of repeating back what they've been trained on. Are they really going to do what you talk about developing new knowledge? Where does something like Strawberry get us in terms of that longer-term goal?
So, part of my subjective experience of the new model was that it was the first time I had a hard time coming up with things to test it on, because it was like so good that I'm like, what can I do that I can quickly evaluate that'll tell me it can do this or not do this? And you can find a lot of toy examples, but in terms of the useful things day to day that you test really quickly, it was like, it is surprisingly good, and this is a very early version. The next version is like really, really good. And that was just sort of a strange experience to go through, and then all of a sudden it was commonplace. I was used to it. I was like, yeah, why isn't it even better? But what I think this enables in the short term is the obvious thing that people are using it for in the very short term is it's so good at helping people with programming things that there's a huge amount of economic value in, and unlock people to build on top of it all sorts of amazing things. In the slightly longer term, a year or 2 years, whatever, I think we will finally be able to see some really great agent-like experiences. Still early, still limited, but once you have a model that can reason, I think you can have a model that can go do longer horizon, more complex tasks for you, and that's going to be tremendously useful to people.
And we're hearing a lot about agents in the last week or two. I know, Amandeep, you were at Salesforce. We heard a ton about agents. Are these the kinds of agents you're talking about? I sort of think of them as mini agents. The types of stuff you're thinking about isn't here today. Where are we with agents?
Definitely not here today. Let's say the kind of thing where you could give a senior colleague a task that would take them a day to do. They'd have to ask you for some clarifications along the way, use multiple different tools and interact repeatedly with an environment, and accomplish some goal.
Amandeep, you sounded a note of skepticism around the power of LLMs. Is what Sam's talking about, is that going to eliminate narrow AI, or do you think...
I think Sam is right that we'll get close to reasoning, but what kind of reasoning? Because as humans, we do inductive, deductive reasoning, we go back and forth. And the agents that are out there, I saw some in San Francisco, the capital of AI, as the mayor called it. So they are getting very impressive. And I think that means a lot already in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of how we communicate government services to people in their own language. I mean, I'm talking of the public side of the application, cool stuff in the marketplace. And very cool stuff in terms of human-machine teaming, handing over tasks to humans when your internal sets don't allow you to go into pricing or return policies. But I think to get to true human reasoning, we will still take some time. At the moment, we're just looking at if the agent is accessing pricing policy, it's going to just look at this thing is being returned within 6 days. It's going to string together different pieces in a very inductive fashion and come to something. But I think to get to true human-like capabilities, and things are moving very fast, I don't want to predict anything beyond 6 to 12 months, we need much more research. And we need to much more about our own capabilities, because we are kind of benchmarking a very basic level of human capability, which is sitting here. We've not got here yet. So, and sometimes we think with our whole body. And Sam is a meditator. He knows when creative things come out in the space between two thoughts. There are many, many things we don't know about human capabilities. We're just latching on to one aspect of our intelligence and then trying to approximate it. We're getting very good at that, but pretty soon we might discover that other things can be happening now.
Sam, how do we you talk about, what you're most excited about being when AI systems are helping aid and doing scientific discovery on their own. It is struggle for me to understand how we get from a system that maybe understands every word that's ever been written on the internet how does it suddenly discover something new versus finding a pattern in existing data?
Not on their own. As a tool for people. Like, what I care about is that the scientific discovery happens. I'm a huge believer that the most important way that the world gets better over time is we push the scientific frontier forward, we understand more about the world, we can cure diseases, we can solve climate change, we can do the long list of other things that we want to do. If we can make people more efficient, if we can help them find better insights, that is equally as good to me, maybe better, as if the AI would just go off and do it. And so I think the bar of we need the AI to autonomously go do this is way too high. The whole history of human progress is we make better tools and then we do better things with them. And I'm totally fine with that being how it works. Enthusiastic. Now, I think with O1 you can see the glimmers of how this is starting to work, and you can like hear, the thing that Terrence Tao said that stuck with me is before O1, AI was like a very incompetent grad student. And now it's like a mediocre grad student that you could like give tasks to, and soon he can see it being a useful research partner. And if Terrence Tao says that, I'm inclined to believe it. So I kind of think that's the path forward. I think people get very hung up on the fact that, but it's just like being trained to predict the next token. The kind of the figure of merit to me, or the thing that we're optimizing for, is do people that are advancing our knowledge, our collective knowledge society, do they find the tool useful or not?
So it sounds like what you're saying, and I don't disagree, is, maybe that's all it does is predict the next token, but that task is so valuable and
So
people are
helpful.
finding value that it doesn't matter.
Once it can start to like prove unproven mathematical theorems, do we really still want to debate, but it's just predicting the next token? Like, if it's contributing new knowledge, it's contributing new knowledge.
So do you ever have the doubt that I do? Like, because it seems like you're always confident, it's always like going to do these things. I vacillate between getting really excited and being like, because I see a lot of not so exciting uses, and I see people running into stumbling blocks too. Are those stumbling blocks just a function of where we are?
It will continue to have weird limitations, and there will be things that it seems like we expect our AI to do that it really struggles with, and there will be some not so awesome use cases. But the thing that I think bothers is too strong of a word. Well, it's also too weak of a word in some other sense. The thing that I find strange is I think if you could go back to, if you could like time warp, any of you in the room, if you could time warp yourselves back a few years ago, and an oracle told you that there was going to be this model called O1 available to anybody on the internet, and it could do all these things, and it was better than all but the top few hundred math students in the United States, and it was in the top very, very echelon of all programmers, and it was like ability to do better than human PhDs on test scenarios, expertise, and all these other things. And that was going to come in just a couple of years or 3 years. Most of you would have said definitely not. And fine, I actually think that's great. I think it is wonderful that we go so quickly from saying this is impossible to, but it's hung up in these ways, to, okay, I said it was impossible, now I say it's too dangerous, to, okay, I said it was impossible, now this other thing is impossible, to finally, why is the thing not faster? I'm tired of waiting. I think that says something great about what propels us forward and human discontent that drives progress. However, I think we do need to contend with very powerful systems coming soon, and that same fine, it did a little better than I thought it was going to do, but this is the ceiling. It's not going to get any smarter. Even people who very confidently said, we're not going to have models that can do reasoning 3 weeks ago, and now but we won't really have super intelligence. I worry that psychological urge is so tempting that we don't really contend with what's coming at us.
I want to get back to that, but I do want to, at the same time this thing is happening, this demand for power and compute is so large, and Amandeep, I kind of want to get your thoughts. Are you at all worried, for both of you, about the environmental impact? We hear a lot about these, are going to help us fight climate change, et cetera. In the short term, they're driving a lot of demand for computing. We're restarting 3 Mile Island. There's a
That's
lot
great, let's do that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm in favor of nuclear energy, but something happened, nuclear weapons also came along the way, and getting to electricity too cheap to meter became very difficult, So I know a little bit about the nuclear domain. So I think we need to think about what are we doing with AI, at what price, and at what cost, and those are just 3 considerations. There may be more. I think the costs are not only energy, but also water, material, copper in particular. And then, the talent that's going into this industry. If you talk to other CEOs of software companies who are not doing AI or other companies, academia, they can't pay those salaries. So there is an opportunity cost to all this. So running queries about, where is the nearest Starbucks through an LLM, I don't know if that's a good use case. So I think we have to think about at what cost we are doing it. And then when it comes to the opportunities, we have to think about the enablers. What do you need to realize those opportunities? 5 years back, my team and I said, we will focus on AMR, antimicrobial resistance, kills millions of people. So we'll use AI to build the best decision support systems. It's like, let's solve for cancer, let's solve for climate change. But excuse my French, it's bloody hard. So even across 2 hospitals in 2 countries, to get them to agree on the same data model, start to put together the data set that would, then train your algorithm, then cross-train it on another data set. So you can multiply this. I don't think we can get a shortcut to all of this through large language models. Large language models will play a very important role in training of farmers in their own language, in triaging patients as they come in. But this will not be a shortcut. Getting to some kind of a super intelligence will not be a shortcut in terms of how do we put together data sets, how do we get nurses and doctors and patients to work together. The dynamics, cultural dynamics in the operation theater between nurses and doctors, it's amazing. So it has to work in that context. Model we had for COVID screening, beautifully in silica. You took it to a hospital, very noisy signal, and just broke down completely. So we are just starting to see it. We are at the beginning of the journey, and we need more humility as we go down this path using a very powerful technology. History is littered with examples of where we've assumed the technology's implication will only go in one direction. They go from the crossbow down to nuclear weapons. There are implications, 2nd order, 3rd order implications that we don't understand. Societal implication. That's why we need some reflection on a continuous basis on what it means, what we need to do about it.
So I asked an environmental question, but Amandeep, I think, took it to a different place, and maybe we can go there and then we'll come back to the environmental question. It seems like a lot of the challenge in absorbing the technology, companies that are trying to use generative AI at work, isn't limitations of the technology, though those are there. Oftentimes it's the processes and the human ability to integrate it and so forth. Is that your sense from working with businesses and organizations too, that a lot of times it's not that the technology isn't ready for them, but they would have to redefine the way they work, or is that not what you're seeing?
Definitely somewhat, but again, we're 22 months into the, this whole era. Like, there was no ChatGPT 22 months ago, and hundreds of millions of people use it. Counting the people that use it through the API, I don't know, but I bet it's more than 1 billion. That's really quite rapid for 22 months. And so I think people are adopting it, and they're doing it because, they get value out of it. It's not perfect, and I disagree with a lot of that, but I do very much agree that it's not all going to be good, and we do have a lot of things in front of us to figure out. But people are finding places where it is good and is useful, and they're building on top of it from there.
And what about on the environmental piece? I mean, is it clear to you that Yes, we have all these demands up front for increased compute, and those are going to create power needs, but it's definitely going to pay off, environmentally. How do you think about that, having a little bit more purview into both what's needed and some of the benefits?
Well, I wish that every time people flew to a conference to complain about energy usage, they had to like, 1 time out of 10, they had to skip it and put all of the money that went to burning fuel into fusion research. Because I believe that the best thing we can
You're speaking to Climate Week at UNGA, where everyone is flown from around the world to talk about the climate.
I do know that. But I think the best thing we can do on the energy front is figure out how to create abundant, safe, clean energy. And I think we have a few the approach I believe in most is nuclear, particularly fusion at massive scale. But I want everybody in the world to have a great life, and I think that if you study kind of history, availability, cost of energy, that's maybe been the single biggest determinant. And so I'd love a lot more of that, and I think we should fund that much more aggressively. Now, I'm also hugely in favor of doing other things, doing all the things that we can do to reduce energy usage. And I think the world has made good strides there. I think a lot of people are out of touch with things they say and the way they act, but that aside, let's make a lot of clean, safe, cheap energy. Let's reduce usage where we can. On the AI front in particular, we talked about this incredible decrease in cost that we've gone through. That's a direct reduction in energy usage too. The energy use of AI, I think relative to the value it's creating, is quite tiny today. I don't want to minimize it too much because it's going to go up. We will use gigawatts over time out of terawatts on Earth, but I think it will more than pay off, not only in terms of benefits towards helping us do a better job with carbon capture and figure out better solutions to the generation side, but also in terms of what it replaces. I agree, it is a little bit silly that people are putting where is the nearest Starbucks through ChatGPT, but it's using a really trivial amount of energy, a truly trivial amount of energy. And we can push so much further to make that even more trivial. And the things that it replaces, many of the other uses, can I think be such a net saving of energy. So yeah, let's get the generation side fixed. Let's get to a future with really abundant energy that we're all happy about. But I think there's so many reasonable things to beat on AI about. There's so many real problems with AI. And I appreciate you talking about things in addition to just the energy constraint, like water and some materials, because I think those are more real. But on the energy side, I think that one has gotten blown quite out of proportion.
So on the energy side, I think, and don't get me wrong, because I'm very excited about AI. I love AI, and I've been in this for a while. But I think on the energy side, just shifting to cleaner sources of energy, Lord knows we need lots of them, 600 million people without access to reliable energy today. We have the Devon's paradox, as coal use in the 19th century got more efficient, coal use rose up. So we are going to have more use of energy, and therefore we also need to think about what are we turning that energy into. So what's the solution that we're looking at? And also we need more collaborative development of AI models. So if everyone is training the same model 1 million times over all around the world, then that's a waste of resources. So I think the world needs to come together to collaborate on solving some of these large challenges. And I agree with Sam, cancer, climate change, plastics in the ocean. But I don't know if we should do it through pinching it up to one place, or it should be done through a more collaborative effort, because we need a massive effort on data sets also. I mean, we can scrape stuff off the internet, but I think and we can use artificial data, synthetic data, but I think the really interesting stuff is still to be done in many of these areas. So collaborative data commons, collaborative AI commons, and sharing compute. I think this is one of the big outcomes from yesterday, a capacity development network where, even in countries in Europe like Finland, Liechtenstein, sometimes at peak use, 40% of the HPCs lie idle. is there a way that we can come together, link this, and be more energy efficient?
Well, obviously, there's a ton to talk about, and if this were a seminar on climate, I would keep going there, but a few different things I want to hit. I have some lightning round questions for Sam that I want to hit on, but Amandeep, you have a chance. What do you want most from, we just saw at the State Department event, it was not just Sam, but it was Google, Meta, Amazon, the leaders of all these companies saying, hey, we want to help this be more equitable. We want, we're putting money to train it in new languages. We're putting money into training people. You launched the OpenAI Academy today. What are your other asks? What isn't happening that needs to happen?
I think these are very commendable. What was announced today, and Sundar came over to the action day 2 days ago, announced a $120 million contribution to talent development. What we fear at the UN is fragmentation of the capacity building effort. And different people pursuing and in the global south we hear, capacity building is being parachuted in without any regard for what we actually need. So we need to have a collaborative capacity development effort around compute, around talent development, around curation of data sets. We also need to shape the marketplaces for data in the future so that SME startups can access data to train their own models. Getting to the right kind of data is becoming very difficult for companies in the global south because the costs are rising and so on. So what we need from the private sector is help in terms of expanding the opportunity. It's good in the long run for the leading AI companies, AI labs as well. Second thing we need is we need the help of these companies in having an up-to-date scientific understanding of the capabilities. I'm not talking of safety because capabilities imply both risks and opportunities. So join us in having a science-based, evidence-based assessment of opportunities and risks on a regular basis so that policy making doesn't happen in the dark. People don't swing from one wild extreme of regulation to another. They do sensible things.
Sam, I'm getting the warning, so I have to get in my lightning round questions of the ones that I know you're dying to answer. So you've talked a lot about what you do, what OpenAI is going to be an expensive thing. You've been raising some money. I hear, are you all set for the next round of funding?
I don't think I can comment on that one. I would love to, but I think that's one of the big no-nos.
All right, then we'll go on to another topic that I'm sure you're eager to talk about. I'm curious, it's been out there for a while that you were working with Jony Ive's company to design some hardware. I think he finally told the New York Times, yeah, it's true. I assume you're not designing a phone, but you have talked about imagining that for each new generation of technology, there tends to be a device.
There can be
not
a
a phone?
Yeah. I mean, the phones are incredible. Like, a phone is, I think, one of the triumphs of human technology for all of its flaws. It's just an amazing thing and really great in its generality. I don't think you should try to do a better phone. I hope that there is something great and new to do, and I think the affordances of AI maybe get there, but it's a long way away, and you've got to sort of go through a process to see if something makes sense.
So not this year, maybe next year?
Long time. I mean, hardware is, like, I think it took OpenAI 4.5 years to ship a product, and I thought that was fast.
All right, and then last topic that I know you're dying to talk about, the next model. I mean, you guys talked about that as great as O1 is, and Strawberry in this direction, you're going to keep building a bigger and bigger model.
We didn't say bigger, we said better.
Okay, better.
Maybe
So
smaller, that'd be great.
is GPT-5 going to be smaller than GPT-4?
I don't know how we're gonna do naming from here on. Genuinely, like we're in this awkward tweener phase of naming, right? Because we're like between paradigms. And we're like discovering the science so fast that I feel pleased if I can predict our roadmap a few quarters out, a few years is hard right now. But what I can say with certainty, don't worry about model size, model capability will go up.
Okay, well, let me ask this a different way. You said you're going to keep developing in the GPT series of models.
Yeah.
My understanding is you're training now, but it's probably not going to happen this year. Is that fair?
Obviously, I'm not gonna say that. I expect some more cool things from us this year, let's say that. Like, Here's one thing I will say. We don't always update the names, but GPT 4.0, the model that was launched, whenever that was, a while ago, to the current model available in the API, like unbelievably better. And I think people should pay more attention to that. Be like, I wonder what they're doing. But like that model, although still called GPT 4.0, performs nothing like the thing that was launched as called GPT 4.0. We just keep making it better and better and better.
So something cool this year.
Many
Don't know what you're gonna
should
name
just
it.
keep getting better.
All right, and you're glad that you closed that last funding round, right? Well, as much as I would love to keep her.
I have a little harder to trap than that.
Yeah.